The Joe Rogan Experience.
And you're coming back from another crazy trip, right?
I am indeed.
What is that nonsense that you did on a kayak? What did you do?
So after I got back from the Impossible First, the Antarctica crossing, right about the time I saw you last year, I got a funny phone call, actually, of all things. People were asking me, what's the next expedition going to be? What are you going to do? And I said, I just walked 54 days by myself across Antarctica. Give me a minute. Give me a minute to relax. And I get a phone call via a buddy of mine from college, connects me to this guy, this Icelandic guy. I've never met him before. His name's Fionn Paul. Don't know his story. I do now. He's an absolute legend. And he says, "Hey, man, you were just in Antarctica, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "I think we should go back to Antarctica." And I was like, "All right, well, what do you think?" And he's like, "In a rowboat. I think we should row a boat from the southern tip of South America to the peninsula of Antarctica across Drake Passage."
How far is that?
About 700 miles.
Can I see what that looks like on a map?
And I said, "Please delete my phone number."
700 miles rowing a boat.
So Drake Passage is known to be, in seafaring, one of the most treacherous, if not the most treacherous kind of passageway in the world. You've got the Atlantic and the Pacific and the Southern Ocean kind of all converging between the Antarctic Peninsula and the southern tip of South America. So you got 40-foot swells, you got, crazy waves, icebergs as you get close to Antarctica. And the mission or the goal was to see if we could, there it is.
That's
right
it?
there. That's it.
That whole area?
That whole area,
From there
right
to there?
From there to there, all the way down to the main peninsula.
How long
there
did
of
this
Antarctica.
take?
So ultimately, it took us just less than 2 weeks to do the entire row, but it was a long journey in the planning from that phone call all the way through to that year. But it was a 2-week or 12-day crossing.
So in the 2 weeks, you had to have 2 weeks worth of food, 2 weeks worth of drinking water, all on the boat.
Yeah. So, water, actually, we have a desalinator. So off of solar panels, everything's solar. There's no engine, no sail, nothing like that. It's just completely human powered rowing.
They have a portable desalinator?
Yeah.
How big is it?
It fits inside one of the tiny so the boat's tiny. The boat's like 25 feet long, 3 guys rowing at a time. So there's 6 of us total in the team ultimately. Barely anywhere to sleep in this tiny little compartments like the size of sleeping in the back of a, hatchback of a Honda Civic or something like that. But yeah, so you've got this desalinator that's basically kind of in one of the central compartments. So it's probably maybe 2 feet by 2 feet square, something like that. And doesn't make water real fast. You can make 10 liters of water in an hour or two, depending on how hot the sun is.
Good.
But it gets it done. Yeah, it gets it done.
Does it taste like whale dicks? What does the water taste like?
It was weird. As we got closer to Antarctica, I think it started messing up because it got real salty. It wasn't doing quite as good of a job. The water near Antarctica was 1 degree Celsius, so 33 Fahrenheit, practically frozen cold water. And I think that was kind of starting to tweak out the system. So
you're drinking salt water.
As we got closer, it was it was still potable, but it was this isn't working as well. But early on, it worked just fine. It was pretty much, cold drinking water.
Like bottled water.
Yeah, wow. Exactly. But then...
Does it only do it for a certain amount of time? Does the filter get filled up or anything?
It worked for the entire 12 days that we were out there. There's guys who have gone on longer, rowing expeditions across the Pacific or the Atlantic or longer stretches of ocean that, works the entire time. But it is one of the things that breaks down. So we had extra spare parts. Fortunately, we didn't have to use any of that. But yeah, no, it worked. And then, yeah, of course, we had to bring food for the entire time as well on there. So that was, a key part of it.
How much food?
So there were 6 of us, like I said. Pretty much all the compartments were full. There was some tiny little compartments, but we basically ate 2 things. So we had freeze-dried meals, so Mountain House freeze-dried meals. We had this little jet boil that we were kind of, as crazy as the waters, it's 40-foot waves were bouncing around on this, trying to hold a jet boil to try to boil some water. It was pretty tough, but some close calls with that. But we also had these bars. So last time, I think we talked about last time I was on here, I had these kind of custom nutrition bars that were made. And so that worked really well for me in the Antarctica crossing. We had done all this kind of blood work.
Explain that again, how those made?
Yeah, so when I was doing my Antarctica crossing, one of the kind of challenges is basically, can you take enough food with you? Because what I was doing was called unsupported, so no resupplies of food or fuel, crossing the landmass of Antarctica 54 days. And so I wanted to get the most optimized nutrition. And so I work with this company called Standard Process, who's a whole food supplement company, and they've got all these sort of doctors, food scientists and this. And I went in their lab for a year, and they did all all this kind of custom blood work on my body, trying to figure out, basically my exact sort of physiology. And they created these bars based on all of the research that they did, that basically were these really high calorie bars, because it was the most high calories that I needed to optimize space. And they're all plant-based and ended up. And then I know there's,
what's in them again?
Coconut oil, nuts, seeds, sort of different phytonutrients and a particular macronutrient blend that I needed. It was about 45% fat, because I needed the high fat, about 40% protein, and then 15, what's the math on that? 15% carbs. And so, excuse me, sorry, I alternated the protein carb quotient there. But yeah, it worked really well for that. And so when I was doing the row, I called up Standard Process again. They've been an amazing partner of mine. And they were like, hey, I'm doing this row. Those bars worked so good last time. And like I just said, with, trying to boil water and, all this stuff is really challenging on the rowboat. The best would be to have this really kind of high optimized nutrition that we could use again for the project like this, but the parameters are different. The humidity is different, the temperature is different. There's 6 of us now. There's not just one of me. Can we optimize it for that? So they kind of made a specialty blend of the bars again, that they've called the Colin bars. They could probably come up with a better name. But it worked really well. Can people
buy those online anywhere?
They're not for sale.
No?
We've talked about doing that, so maybe in the future. But you can see online on their website like all the different supplements and stuff that went into it, so you can kind of buy the component parts. But yeah, one day we might make them, but they've been kind of just custom for these 2 projects. But they've worked really, really well, particularly in the rowing. So, they worked amazing in the Antarctic crossing as well. But in the rowing, it was 90 minutes of rowing on, 90 minutes of rowing off, continuous, 24 hours a day. So we're kind of in 2 sets of 3, 6 of us total, 3 people rowing, 3 people resting. And in that 90 minutes that you're off, that's also when you got to, eat, drink, sleep. It's your only time to rest, basically. And so as much time as you can kind of optimize eating and stuff meant more sleeping. And so to have these bars, get done with a 90-minute rowing shift, be able to eat, 1,000-calorie bar, highest, quality nutrition in your body. Standard Process nailed it again. It was amazing to, have these bars and have it work really well for all of us to kind of optimize not just the food, but also the efficiency of sleep, because the sleep got fucking crazy out there. Like,
I can imagine.
Yeah.
So you're basically sleeping every 90 minutes for 1 hour or so.
Yeah, exactly. Ish. Like if you can get it, and like once the swells start cranking up, like you're in this tiny compartment. Like I don't know if we could pull up a picture of the boat for a visual or some on my Instagram.
Is it covered at all?
Not covered. Like really not covered at all. Like there's covered in the tiny compartment. So the rowing part's not covered at all. So when you're rowing, waves are splashing up like over top of you. You're getting completely soaked. Like you're getting completely soaked the entire time. And then the tiny compartment, it's like lower than this table. Like you'd be like kind of crouched down like in there. Yeah, so this is the rowboat right here. So that's us.
So that's the floor. Is that where all the food is stored underneath?
Yeah, underneath there's compartments. So you can see that tiny little kind of compartment on either side. One's smaller and one's bigger.
And that's where you guys would sleep?
That's where we'd sleep. Well, the bigger one, that's the waves.
It's hard to believe that there's 12 people in that little thing.
No, 6 people. 6 people.
6 people.
Yeah. But still, so you got 3 people in the 3 people rowing and 3 people in the compartments at any time. I think if you kind of scroll up to the top, maybe there's one of just it shows like the whole boat, or like what it looks like. Maybe there's kind of a shot of it. So you can see in there. Like the back little compartment, that's where I was. Then I was alternating with this guy, Fionn, who I mentioned, the Icelandic guy who was the captain of the boat, really experienced ocean rower. And we alternated inside this little cabin. And then the other 4 guys, they alternated 2 people because that one's a little bit bigger in the front. That's the bow cabin in the front. But they're like, you're like head to toe in there, or you're crouched into a little ball. It's not glamorous at all.
And did you know these guys at all before you did this?
So not really. Not really. It was a deep dive into the team. And after doing something solo, I was pretty excited to do something, as a team and doing something in a completely, exploring a completely different kind of avenue of exploration in the ocean, something I'd never done before. And I had actually, not only did I not know these guys, a couple of them I went to college with, but we like really loosely knew each other. Like I kind of like maybe like, recognized their face a little bit, but we weren't like good friends or anything like that. 3 of them I'd never met in my entire life. And I have never rowed a boat in my life ever before. And so when Fionn, he called me up and told me about the project. He's one of the world's most renowned ocean rowers. He's got, 30 world records or something like that. Complete legend. He's rowed boats across every single ocean. And this was like the kind of the last, big ocean that he'd never crossed. No one had ever done it just like this before. And so he kind of said, hey, I wanted this idea, but the logistics are super complicated. Like going to Antarctica is all this sort of like treaties that you need, all this paperwork, getting a boat down to South America, importing it through the Panama Canal, et cetera. I mean, it's like a tough thing. And he'd been like kind of thinking about it for a year or so. And he said like, hey, I've seen you pull off some big projects together. Can we kind of team up? And I know, your team has got really good at figuring out these logistics. Would you be interested? And I'd actually looked at ocean rowing a couple years ago as something that I always wanted to do one day. And so it was kind of after I kind of got that first phone call, like I said, like kind of like, dude, I just got back from Antarctica. I don't want to go back there like tomorrow. But, of course, the curiosity inside of me got the best of me. And I called him back up and I said, hey, let's do this. What are you thinking? And kind of dove into it from there. Kind of my team kind of wrapped our arms around the sort of like logistic and building out the project. And he was definitely the visionary of something that he dreamed up. And it was super cool to team up with him after doing something alone.